Right, so this is a 3-stage intake manifold install for a Bmw E152 with 328i, 325i with the N52 engine. This is our 3-stage manifold here with the DISA valves, which I refreshed. You can see how they're closed up here on the side. They're fully working. And this is the stock intake manifold. You can see it doesn't have the DISA valve on the side. Before you even begin doing this swap, you want to get these two cables right here, and you want to get a Bmw implant on your computer, and you're gonna plug it into the car. I'm gonna show you how to do it when I show you how to flash with Bimmerlabs, which is a free tune that you can flash your N52 engine to use the DISA valves. So you want to test those DISA valves before you swap the manifold in. The tune goes first, and then you swap the manifold in. So you can test that these valves work great, because they're supposed to flop open and close, but if they're not working correctly, yes, you can. This one is on the outside, and you can pull it out and replace it. But this one, that one is on the inside. This one right here, and that one is not gonna be easy to access. So if that one is bad, and you don't know, your engine is not gonna run right, and it's gonna be right here on the intake of the manifold. So if you're gonna have to replace it, you have to pull the whole manifold again. So it's better to be safe than sorry. So test them out before you put the manifold in. Alright, so let's begin the swap process. Most of it is gonna be disassembly. So get a T15 bit. We're gonna take out these two bolts. Or screws, whatever you wanna call them. Remember to put everything together so you don't lose parts. There we go. So huge sheet is gonna put it here on the side. Next up on the list, get yourself a nice little flathead, and you're gonna pry off that connector for the map sensor. Pull it out. You're gonna get the worm clamp, screw it off, so it allows you to take out that pipe. There you go, it's loose. Then you're gonna get yourself a ratchet with a 10mm socket, and you're gonna take out these bolts to remove the airbox. Alright, she's out. Next thing up, remove your covers for the brake master cylinder and the ECU on the other side. Over here. Now she goes up. Here we go. So this is the sensor that gives you the air quality outside for your air conditioning system. Next thing we do is to grab an 8mm socket. You're gonna want to screw all the screws out. You can see right here, all of them are 8mm. So that's the cabin air filter assembly, and out she goes. So taking out this cowling, this should just pull out. You can see. So it's gonna be 8mm screws around here, one here. After pulling these little pieces out, you can see. This one out. You also want to help yourself out. Pry this off. Make sure not to damage them. Put a little flathead. There you go. That holds wiring for your entire computer and all that crap, so you don't want to screw it up. Alright, and it should just pull out. As you can see. There we go. You want to pry open this piece. Basically, you just pull these tabs out one by one, as well as the bag, so you can take out all the wiring, all the hoses. This is gonna give you more room since you're not gonna have the bracket on top of the engine. All right. So next thing up, get your Allen key. I'm gonna be pulling out the engine cover. And all these steps, if you have an E90, you probably already know how to do them, because you probably had to take all this crap off to service it. But this is just a very thorough guide, so people can know exactly what the job takes to do. Next thing I want to do is remove the strap brace. I don't think it's necessary, but I want to give myself more room. So that's going to be an E14 socket. Alright, so an E14 down here, gonna be an E18 up here. They're pretty tight on there. There you go. Now to make sure we don't screw with any of the electronics of the car, we're gonna disconnect the battery. More the warning, if you have this generation BMW and it is newer than 2009 I believe, or 2010, it is not going to have this hole in the trunk. So if you're gonna disconnect the battery, make sure you put something to cover the latch, because if it closes with the battery disconnected, you will not be able to open the trunk. So unless you have a hole or a pass-through through the seats, you're gonna be screwed. So maybe you can put the seats down and then save yourself the trouble. So we're gonna disconnect the battery. This is gonna be a 10 millimeter right here, a 13 millimeter right here. I want to take out the whole thing. I don't want to risk it catching power or something like that unexpectedly. As you can see, this comes right off. It's gonna have 2 tabs on the side, which you have to pry off so it comes off of the battery. See what I did right here? I just pulled this here and held it with a cable. And I pulled this one out here, held it with a cable. This is what powers your car, this whole box, main fuse. So if it's not connected to that, it won't do shit. So you're safe. Next thing we're doing, we're removing the power steering reservoir. We're not removing it, we're just basically relocating it. So you can get it out of the way so you can give yourself more room. So this is how I moved it. Be careful with this vacuum hose. Moved it over here, which is probably what it should be from the factory, but anyway. We have more room here. We're gonna start disconnecting connections right now. You can see the manifold is not too hard to take off. The bolts are right there. Most of the problem is gonna be disconnecting hoses and bolts like that. Alright, so when it comes to disconnecting these hoses, you're supposed to press here and pull out. Of course, that's not gonna work 99.9% of the time because these are fucking horrible design. So you're gonna have to press them and get yourself with a flathead screwdriver and help yourself out. I can't show that on camera, or I can't try to because it's too tight. I have to use both hands, but that's what you're supposed to do. Little by little, press them out and then try to pry them out around the sides with the screwdriver. You don't want to have to break hoses. You shouldn't break any hoses. Next thing we're gonna remove is gonna be the map sensor, which is supposed to pry up again. Same idea, pain in the ass to do with just one hand. I'll show it off. Alright, that sensor is up. So here comes this sensor. Be very careful because it has like a little tab. You're gonna want to pry it off. Next thing you're gonna have to disconnect your Bluetooth sensor wires. As you can see, basically they're going on top of the manifold, so it's gonna make it a pain for you to remove the thing itself. So we're just gonna pull it out and push them down here. The shorter one is the one for the first one up here, so it shouldn't be an issue for anyone. So we're gonna be pulling out this intake elbow. You're just gonna have a worm clamp with a flat head on the side, or a 6 millimeter, whatever you wanna call it. There's a replacement part for this piece, which increases performance because it doesn't have the sound generator, which is a silicone hose. I might give a link to that in the description. So this is the other part that's connected to the throttle plate. So here's the part, just pull it out. There you have your throttle body and a lot more room. Now these holes right here, this is not a hose, it's basically a cable for the battery. It goes to the main battery supply. You want to pull that out. It goes all the way over here, so you don't want to screw it up. Right, this out. And now we go on to this hose. This hose goes to your valve cover. You don't want to screw that hose up because that's one of the main parts of the whole project. If you do, you're gonna have to buy a new one. Your car's gonna be down for a while. So we're gonna be very gentle on that hose. This hose right here is gonna make you want to quit the entire fucking job. So this hose goes to the back of the valve cover right here, and basically it's gonna be in this way. And you're gonna have to press the 2 sides super hard for it to come out. So the way I recommend to do it, before you struggle with it, like I just did for the past 30 minutes, is get a flathead like this one and go from here and you're gonna want to pry lightly against the hose. You don't need that much force because you're using like a lever, which is a flathead, because you don't want to break off the valve cover. Then you're gonna want to kill yourself. But you go like that, and then you go like this, and then you might want to put like a little flathead screwdriver in between the joint, between the hose and where it meets the valve cover back here, and kind of like lightly pry it off. It's a pain in the ass. It's probably one of the hardest parts of the job. But so far we're good. Next thing up, I'm gonna be disconnecting the connector for the throttle body. Alright, that connector is off. Just press it from the bottom. Has like a tab in the back. You can see there. If you want, you can label these connectors if you don't know what you're doing. I have done it a few times, so I already know half-assed what each connector does. All these cables down there, they go to a junction box, which holds all the cables of the DISA balls, which are these, which holds the map sensor, everything, and it is under the throttle body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the throttle body, pull it out so we can have more space and see. I'm probably going to unscrew the junction box and then bolt it up to the new manifold. I'm not even going to bother taking it out. So this is a 10mm bolt, 10mm socket for all the bolts in the throttle body. Alright, so you can see there's a junction box down there, which goes bolted to the manifold. I'm going to show you in a second. All the electronics here, you need to take that out. If not, you're not going to be able to remove the manifold, or you're going to damage something. Another thing you're going to want to take out is that connector right there on the manifold that goes to the fuel evap purge canister, whatever. That's all the gases from the fuel tank. They get sent into the intake manifold, and that goes through that connector right there. So you need to take that out, or you won't be able to remove the manifold. Let me show you where the junction box is bolted to the manifold. As you can see, this is my 3-stage, but it's the same setup. These two bolts down here are the ones that hold the box in place. They can be hard to get to because it is in this position in the car. So let me show you this. Bolts are down there. I want to tell you what bolts they are. I want to show you how to do it. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, very dark down there. Alright, pulled out the connector. Wasn't even near as hard as the one in the valve cover. A few flatheads, help yourself out. Alright, so just remove the box. These are the screws you're gonna have there. They're a T27. Gonna be hard to reach because there's a lot of crap and cables in the way. But the box is off. These are the little screws. You can see this is where they go on the manifold. I think we have disconnected mostly everything. So I think we're good to go to start taking off the manifold bolts, which are all these that you see right there. Might have to remove the fuel rail because we have this fuel line which goes out to the back, but hopefully we can wiggle it out from there. All of these are 11mm. I will suggest you get an 11mm with an extension so you make your life easier. So it's gonna be about 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, and then the manifold should come right out. Just like that, she's loose. So let's see if she comes out. There we go. It's gonna get tied up with garbage because we're not perfect, but we probably left some garbage connected, some stuff connected to the manifold. But let's see how it goes. There we go, the manifold is loose. There's some other stuff we need to take care of. For example, the PCB heater, which is down here, has a connector which we need to remove. So let's get to it. This is the PCB heater connected down there. Very hard to see, but it's the same idea as the other ones. Get a flat head. And this is why I tell you guys to be gentle, because this right here that you see there, that is mounted there, that's a fuel line for the fuel rail, so you don't want to rip that out. So we're gonna go take off that fuel line, and the manifold is completely removed. So here it is. This is the fuel line. The screw at the top is a T25 Torx. And here we have a naked N52. I'm gonna give you guys a closer look. And first off, this is the intake manifold. This is the 328i stock intake manifold. You can see where it's missing the hole for the DISA above here. And where we have it in our manifold, which is in the back over here. There we go. Very different parts. I don't know if inside the N52 manifold for 328 the runners are closed or how they work, but I'll do some research and make a video on it. This is the PCB hose. These two you're gonna, if you have I have a whole video that goes over the routing for these hoses, because the routing is going to change depending on the year. I made sure to get a manifold that has the 2 ports, as you can see here, a 3-stage, so it is going to match up with the same stock hose that I have on 328. But if you get a manifold from an 05 car or earlier, it might only have 1 port. Or if you have a car yourself, a 325 that has only 1 port from the factory, and your manifold has 2 ports, you're gonna have to modify the hose. I'm going to put a link in the description to a video that explains all the hose setups and what you will need to do if you have if your manifold doesn't match your stock PCB system or vice versa. Alright, so see here comes the easier part. This is the PCB heater valve, and as you can see, I didn't know this, but the O-ring was just completely broken in there. So this might be something that you want to look into if you're doing this up and you don't have a spare one, because who knows if this O-ring, I didn't have any vacuum leaks or anything like that, but it was indeed ripped up. You can see the other part right here. So this hose is just gonna go all the way into this manifold. The PCB heater is a recall item. I believe the earlier ones have this notch right here, as you can see. So that's the updated part. So that's the one that you want to put in. You want to put in one that doesn't have it. So you can pick and choose to see which one you put in there. But this is the one we're going to be using. I'm going to be putting the O-ring from my other PCB heater, which I've got right here, on that one, and then tighten it all up. I decided to reuse the valve from the car that I pulled out because I cleaned the inside and everything, and it just looked better. They're the same part numbers, it doesn't really matter. One way to know if this hose is cracked inside is like you go and you press this. This foam is built so it holds oil. So if your hose were to be cracked and it was leaking oil through there and leaking vacuum, you will find out by pressing on it. Mine is super clean, which is great news. Alright, so the valve is in. Same 225 Torx bits, that's what you need for the screws there. I'll just slap everything in there. These connectors are easy to put in, but super hard to take out. There you go. This manifold, we're gonna have to swap in all these pieces. We're gonna have to move them from this manifold, the stock one, to the 3-stage one. I'm moving over this sensor to my manifold. I have a spare one. I'm gonna use the one that was in the car, so there's no faults. And I'm moving over this bracket, this one right here. Basically anything else I find. Everything that you see on your stock manifold, you move it to your 3-stage to make sure that it fits right in and all the connections are where they're supposed to be. Right, so I swapped over mostly everything from the stock manifold to the 3-stage one. And this is the throttle plate, which is a stock one that was on my car. I'm gonna reuse it on this manifold. Even though I have the other plate, I think there's no difference between them, and I would rather have the one that the car has. There's no issue with it. If there's a benefit, I might swap it over later, but I doubt it. This is just, again, like we saw, 4 bolts, 10 millimeters. You can replace the throttle body gasket if you want. I didn't, it looked pretty good. If you need to do it, it's not that hard of a job, so take the risk. One thing I did replace, and I recommend you do, is the intake manifold gaskets, because you already saw how the work that it takes to get this manifold out. So if those gaskets are bad, you don't have to do this whole job again. And do you want to do it for no reason? No. So just spend the money. I spent like 20 bucks for a nice name brand one for these gaskets, and that's what I'm using. This is the stock gaskets that were in my manifold. They look okay, but they were oily a bit, and I don't want to risk them not sealing as good as they would after taking them out and putting them back in. These are not hard. You just get a little flathead, pry it out, put the new one in. Okay, it's done. Not that big of a deal. You just replace it to save yourself a headache down the way. Like I said, I wanted to give you guys a closer look at the N52 without the intake manifold. It's pretty crazy the amount of room that you have without that big piece in there. There's a starter motor, which obviously you probably will not be able to get to if you have the manifold in place, which is why people have to remove it when that goes bad. This might be a good time to replace it if you want. Mine is fine. I'm probably gonna take the risk, and it looks pretty good. So who knows if it was replaced before. Here is the whole wiring. I'm gonna give you guys a look around. It's a transmission back there. Here you have the intake ports. Let's see if I can get you a light. Here you can see the valves in there. There's people that have run this engine without the intake manifold because the engine doesn't really use the throttle plates. The throttle plate uses the failsafe. The engine runs based on variable valve lift. That's how it controls RPM. So it'll be pretty cool to do, but I'm not gonna run it. I'm not gonna take the risk of running it without the intake manifold. Also, if your oil filter housing gasket is leaking, this is probably a very good time to do it because that bolt back here is 6 degrees, and all of these are as well. So this might be a really good time to replace that as well. If you're OCD about dirt and all that, you might want to spray down this with a bit of carburetor cleaner or something like that. I don't really care. You don't see this part, and it's not even that dirty anyway. So we're gonna keep it this way. So last look around. There you have it. Alright, so now that I'm done looking around the engine, I set up the manifold and everything. I'm gonna go and put it back in the 3-stage. So let's get to it. Here you have it. Very hard to have the camera in the way. Sorry I couldn't film how to put the manifold in. Basically you just have to squeeze it in and make sure this and all the hoses stay on top of the manifold. Basically when I was putting it in, I hit this and I broke the little plastic bracket that holds it on top of the alternator. This is the hose that goes to the vacuum pump, which provides vacuum to your braking system. So just like this, you have to be very careful because you can damage stuff that is more important. This stupid bracket, I can get it at the junkyard and won't have an issue. But it might be something more important than this. Either way, the manifold is in. So now we're gonna go bolt up the bracket down here, which I'm not going to record. There is a pin in the rear. You already saw where it is located. You're gonna be able to find it. It's very tight down there with all the cables. You have to move them around and you might have a chance of dropping stuff down there, but it's doable. The 2 cables for the O2 sensors, remember, they go in between these 2 runners, and they go down here, one to this one and one to this one. This is the vacuum hose that goes down here. We still have the pump, the power steering reservoir here, and we're gonna basically start mounting stuff up. It's the same. It's just a reversal of what of us removing the manifold out. It's not that hard. Here's something that I almost forgot myself. These are the cables for the DISA valves. They are covered in this little plastic cover. You're gonna see them. They're hooked to the side of the manifold. And these you have to plug them into the DISA valves. The longer one, I'm pretty sure it goes to the inside one because the other one just doesn't reach. So we're gonna have to go and have to wiggle it in there. This is why you don't bolt up the manifold until you're done and connect it there to the DISA valve. Right, so I plugged in the DISA valve on the inside. I had to pull the manifold out a bit. So what I'm saying, if you're swapping this manifold out and you don't want to do this again, I suggest at least the small DISA, you buy a name brand one, a nice brand one, something like that, to put it in there. I'm an idiot, so I put one that I repaired, and I'm gonna try my luck and hope it works out. But for most people, buy a brand new DISA, the one that goes on the inside, the small one, and the outside one you can take a chance. You can put whatever you want there. If it goes bad, it's 4 screws and you pull it out. But this one you have to pull the manifold out, which is a whole different job. So I suggest if you're gonna do the swap, get the new DISA. We're just gonna go on the manifold, push it a bit in. See how she's seated now. Bolted up the bracket for the fuel line. Make sure your cables for the DISA valves, they're not tangled, so you're not forcing the wiring. You can see this is for the small one, this is for the large one. This is the MAF sensor cable. Everything else is just witchcraft that I don't know where it goes. Another thing you might forget, and when I say you might forget, I say I forgot it, is the PCB heater connector, which goes right down there into the PCB heater. Some people have disconnected and have had no issues. Some people have had issues. Just plug it in. You're not gonna have an issue as long as you have the updated part number that the recall specifies, which I'm going to put it in the description as well. Alright, so these, they go on that bracket right there, which I have bolted up. You can see right there, MAP sensor connected. You can see right here. First thing you want to hear a click. I think we're mostly done. Let's find the floor plate cable, which is down by the steering linkage. You can see we're gonna plug it in. I cleaned it with contact cleaner. I clean most connectors with contact cleaner. I recommend you do it too, or don't. Who knows, if it fails after that, actually do whatever you want. Let's see. There you go. She's good on there. Alright, so I just screwed on the junction box, which is very hard. The screws are a pain in the ass to put in, so take your time. You don't want to leave that box just by itself. Right, so everything else I think is in order. One thing you don't want to forget is the hose that goes to the throttle body. You can see it there on top of the throttle body. That hose right there that goes to the perch valve for the EVAP system. You don't want to forget it. I forgot it and it was a bitch to put in. So you want to put it in and don't forget it. And you're gonna see. You can't just put it in as soon as you put the manifold, and you have to kind of wiggle it in place. So there's a lot of stuff that you might forget, which is why I recommended people to label the connectors and all that stuff. But you can guide yourself by the video too. So this goes on top of this bracket. Right. This as well. These they go into the thing that holds them in place. We still haven't bolted the manifold in. This is the PCB hose, which we're going to be plugging in right now. This is the pain in the ass. There you go. This hose is a bitch to take out, as you saw earlier. I've tried to design a system to delete the PCB system to vent it to atmosphere, but we might do it later or not. There wasn't almost any oil inside my intake manifold, so it's not a big deal to me. So the manifold is in, everything is plugged in as it's supposed to be, at least as far as I'm concerned. So we're gonna bolt it down. I recommend that when you're putting the bolts in, you first start them by hand, so you don't risk cross-threading a bolt in the cylinder head. You can see right here, sometimes it can be tough to get in. So if you do that with a ratchet, you might cross-thread it and damage it. But all of them are 11 millimeters, and the torque for them is going to be 11 foot-pounds, according to the Bentley manual. So 11 foot-pounds, 10 foot-pounds, that's what I will set it to, and just torque it in place. People recommend to replace the hardware in here. I didn't do it. You might want to do it if you see fit. I think they will hold up just fine since they're not torqued that hard. Alright, so I checked everything. I don't see any connections that are missing. I think everything is plugged in where it's supposed to be. Just put this piece in, which has the part of the throttle body, which has that worm clamp back there, 6mm socket. Or if you want to go to the flathead, I think it's easier with a socket. Here we have the other part of the throttle body, of the intake track, which this piece has this down here, which is supposed to muffle the intake sound. There's a silicone piece that you can replace it with. I'm just gonna reuse it. Goes right in, and again 6mm again, worm clamp. Make sure everything is seated. It should pop nicely, especially that one that goes to the throttle body, because I had some issues sitting it in place. You don't want to have a vacuum leak. Alright, so we put this is in. Everything is seated nicely. Put the power steering reservoir right in place. We're gonna tighten it up and put the rest of the airbox and torque down the intake manifold. Alright, so the manifold is torqued in place. You gotta plug this in for the oil pressure sensor. This is the setup of how it goes, how all the wiring goes on this bracket. There's another bracket that goes on top which holds onto this one, so don't try to force it into this. This is this piece right here. Alright, so the strut brace is the next step. This bolt that goes to the fire, where I have the socket in, it goes in 74 foot-pounds and 100 degrees after that. And this one down here goes 30 foot-pounds and 60 degrees. I don't like to tighten them that much because it's an aluminum bolt. I just knock them down real nice, and they have done good for me. If you want to go with the torque fix, I gave it to you. Alright, so put in the cowl cover in. It is gonna have a little bunch of little, you can see them down there. So you move, they're supposed to go under the rubber seal. Very hard to do. Camera in the hand. So they're supposed to go down there. Now that it is in place, we just get this whole thing here, pull it up. You're gonna hear it latch. There you go. All of them. You can see how you want it to fit nicely all the way around. To flush so you don't get water in your ECU or something like that. Then you're gonna get this kind of rubber locks down here, lock it in place. This one is here too, and then we're gonna put the two 8mm bolts that go on each end. Covers with the brake master cylinder and the ECU are in. Everything locked up. Air quality sensor in. Everything nice, tight in place. Alright, so cabin filter assembly is in. Put the piece there. Let's put the airbox in place. Be careful with the MAP sensor. That's not a cheap piece. Okay. Also make sure that the hose, the connection for the MAP sensor in the airbox is seated real nicely. You don't wanna have any air leaks and stuff like that. So airbox is in. MAP sensor is plugged in as well. Gonna seat the intake air scoop in here. Screw it down in place. Do a recheck over everything. Connect the battery and start the engine. So everything under the hood I think is pretty much done. It wasn't that hard. It only took me about probably 3 to 4 hours because really I'm recording with the phone and you drop stuff in there and stuff like that, and you get stuck on stock hoses. But for the most part, the job is not that hard. Just make sure that you have time to do it and you have the right tools and don't rush through it. So let's go get to the battery. Alright, so here we are at the battery. I put the negative in, and then we have the positive connector. Just gonna go right over here. It's already making contact, but not yet, buddy. There we go. You can see everything is plugged in now. So it's gonna be a 10mm for every bolt for the battery, except for this one, which is a 30mm, I believe. So the bracket, 2 screws, 10mm. Alright, so this is how it's supposed to look like. Let's put the box in here. There's a bit of few small brackets in the back. Everything goes back in. Then you make sure to have everything seated nicely, and it goes in place like that. There you go. Everything's super tight. Alright, so we can get to reset the key a few times in and start the engine. Alright, so we just finished the entire intake manifold swap, and you can hear outside the 4th of July fireworks. Pretty cool. Alright, so after we're done with this, I looked over everything. Everything seems to be connected in place. I plugged in the battery, so let's go inside and hope the car starts out perfectly fine. I think we're not gonna have any issues. If we do, we can troubleshoot it later on. Let's go inside. All right. I'm going to cycle the key in and out a few times. Alright, let's start it up. So far so good. 4x4 code is due to a transfer case actuator that I have, and usually when you take out the battery, if you have an X-drive car, it will reset the 4x4 until you drive around for a bit. So don't worry too much about that if you have an X-drive car. Let's go and check on the engine. Here she is, seems to be running pretty good. Let's wait for the RPM to drop to see if there's any vacuum leak or anything. I doubt there is because I made sure to everything for it to be seated nicely. Let's see. Sounds pretty good. Very smooth as well. Use a cold start because it's been sitting down all day, so I recommend you do this job when the car is very cold so you don't burn yourself. It's a lot easier on yourself. While it idles down, let's give you a bit of a look around the car. There you go. So you see? Very smooth to idle. No shaking or anything. I think we did it right. I think running fine. I'm gonna go take it out for a drive, and I'm going to later on make a review of how the car drives with the intake manifold. So this video is just to show you exactly the DIY physical process. I also will have a video for how to flash the car with a Bimmerlabs tune. So the tune, all you need for it is going to be this CAN cable from Bmw. That's all you will need, and you can flash it through your computer with WinKFP. I'm going to make a whole video tutorial on how to do it, so you can add power to your engine. Alright, so I just came back from the second drive. I did a first drive, and what happened was I got it up to temperature. It was running fine, and I did a pull, and I did a second one, and after that one it started running, backfiring and running rough. Basically what happened was the vent for the fuel tank evap vent, which is back there, I don't know if you guys can see it, it's very hard to see, have popped off. Basically you're gonna see it's next to the intake manifold. I'm gonna show you on the spare manifold I have. That popped off, and then the engine was running super rough. So if you swap your manifold in and your car is stopped running rough or idling or basically or dying, basically most likely it's going to be a vacuum leak. So you want to recheck all the vacuum connections and everything and make sure they're all good, they're all tight. You want to look at them closely because there's a very high chance that you screwed it up. But overall the car runs very good, and I'm going to do a full review on it. There's a lot of more low end torque, there's a lot of more top end. This is a great mod that every N52 should have. So this is what popped up on my car. The hose connects right here, basically pops off, and really is a bitch to put in after you put the manifold in, but it is doable. So stuff like this can happen because you're not gonna do a perfect install, or hopefully you do, but most of the time it isn't. This can disconnect. You also have vacuum connections at the back of the manifold right here on the PCV heater and down here, and maybe your hose might even be bad. So to make sure that you don't screw anything up, replace the intake gaskets, and if you can get a new hose, do it. So you're gonna save yourself a lot of trouble. Alright, so I hope the video has been at least pretty comprehensive. I think it has most of the information that you will need is step by step. Basically most, if not all, of the hose connections, all the connectors and everything. You can use the video as a guide if you want. You don't even need to label stuff. But if anything, you have any other questions, any extra stuff that you want to know, you can ask in the comments and I'll try to reply to them. Just make sure to replace the intake gaskets. They're not a failure point, but the ones in your car are going to be old and beat up, so it's cheap and it's better than having to pull the manifold again. And make sure you tune the car first. I have a video on that, so you can check the DISA valves and make sure they activate and work properly, because you don't want to have to redo the job again. But overall it's pretty straightforward. It's not that hard to do. Just take your time, have the right tools, and get to it.